Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to Gazzoviz on your Easter Sunday, and happy Easter to all of you. Thanks so much for tuning in to Gazzoviz on your Easter day. It's not only Easter Sunday though, it is also Solar Sunday. So very exciting day at Gazzoviz. We only do one or two Solar Sundays a year. This is our first Solar Sunday since July last year, so it's been a long time coming, getting on for a year, and I'm going to bring you up to date with all of the latest developments. Good friend James Ackrill has updated all of the solar trackers, so we're going to go through those first of all. And they've actually got some forecasts now for Solar Cycle 25. When I did last year's Solar Sundays, I said that we're quite late with the forecasts for Solar Cycle 25, but we have got a few in now, so we're going to go through those in the second part of the video. So sit back, enjoy, get yourself a cup of tea and a cup of show. We're going to be here for a little while. The video will be placed on the Solar Cycle 24-25 updates page later on. Today, and there'll be a written post that goes with it as well, if I can get that in. If not, the written post, I suppose, have to go up tomorrow, but hopefully I'll get that all done for you later on today. Really busy day at Gazzoviz today. We're going to have to start counting down to a May Day bank holiday weekend. That's coming up later on today. So we're going to also have a look at the ECMWF and Metro France long-range seasonal models for the next few months. That's going to be quite an interesting watch, I would have thought. And of course, we're giving away the prize. So we've teamed up with metcheck.co.uk. We're giving away a temperature and humidity forecast station. It's worth £50. It's a fantastic prize. Got over 200 entrants. You've still got a few hours to get in and to get your entry into the prize draw. We're going to close that at 5 o'clock tonight until 5 o'clock this evening, and then we'll announce the winner in a video at 7 o'clock this evening, and also give you your exclusive discount code as well. There may be a Gazzoviz Sunny Roundup coming up. I'm not sure I'm going to have time to do it, really. I've got so much else happening today. I'm not sure if we'll get Gazzoviz Sunny Roundup in. It would be nice to do it and bring you up to date with the weather for next week, 10 days, but it just depends whether I can fit it in along with everything else. It may be Easter Sunday, but we never stop at Gazzoviz. Big thank you to James, coming back to Solar Sunday. Big thank you to James Ackrill for updating all the trackers for us, all of the trackers for us. Also, big thank you to Richard Chorch. James and Richard have provided invaluable input into Solar Sunday. We really do work as a free part ensemble, if you like, and it's a very much a collaborative process. So big thank you to James, big thank you to Richard for their input in Solar Sunday. And without anything further to say, I think we better get on with it. So we're going to start off with the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net. So solar activity is at very low levels, even though we have got a couple of sunspot regions. We've got one just there, and we got one over here, so there are a couple of sunspot regions on our side of the disk, on the solar disk today. But Solarham is reporting that solar activity is at very low levels and is expected to remain at very low levels for the next week. This is the Gazzoviz Solar Sunday Activity Tracker, updated up to the 18th of April by our good friend James Ackrill. So we've got the orange line here, which is depicting each individual day's sunspot numbers, and you can see that we're a bit up and down at the moment. We are going through a slightly more active period, so we went through quite a prolonged period without any sunspots just there from sort of January into the beginning of March. So February was a very, very quiet month with solar activity. Since then we have ticked up a little bit through March and into April. You see these spikes that are appearing there, each individual day sunspots, and that tells us that we are seeing sunspots on many days at the moment. A few days still that are spotless, but many days at the moment have sunspots, and it is enough to be lifting up our trend lines. The trend lines are the thick green and the thick red lines. They're lifting up on our tracker at the moment. Now, you have to bear in mind, this is at a very low level of solar activity. So, I mean, we're just talking about very minimal numbers of sunspots. But it does tell us that we probably aren't yet at true solar minimum, because when we get to true solar minimum, we will probably have several weeks, if not months, with virtually no sunspots. So, I mean, we're at a very low level. We're around solar minimum, definitely, but we may have a few months of solar cycle 24 still left before we go into true solar minimum. Don't often talk about this line up here, this pink line. That is depicting solar flux. A lot of people ask me what that's showing and what solar flux is. So I'm just going to give you a little sort of summary of what solar flux is. So solar light flux or concentrated sunlight is a measure of how much light energy is being radiated in a given area. So essentially, it's the energy, it's a depiction of the energy that is being pushed out by the sun in terms of solar light flux. And you see this line doesn't vary as much as the sunspot line. You don't get as many spikes upwards or downwards with this, but we can see in the last week or two that we have had a little bit more solar flux as well. And again, the thick purple line, that's kind of like the trend for solar flux. You see, it's much more flatliney, that trend line, compared to the trend lines that we have down here, the thick green and thick red lines. We see they're much more up and down. So they're moving quite a lot through the solar cycle as we get these variations from day to day and week to week and month to month and year to year, get these variations in sunspots. So the trend lines there are moving up and down quite a lot, but in terms of solar flux, that doesn't vary anywhere near as much, and the purple line there actually just kind of like quite flat. But in individual days we do get variation, and you see that at the moment we are going through a little bit more solar flux. That just tells us again what we see down here, that we've got these sunspots at the moment, albeit a small number of them, and they are giving out a little bit of the energy, and we see that through solar flux. So if you have a look at solar cycle 24 overall, this is where we're currently sort of sitting. So we can go right to the very start of solar cycle 24 with this chart, and that's the beginning of solar cycle 24 just there. This is where we are right now with that orange spot just there. That's depicting the sunspot number that we had in March. So it's updated up to March 2019. So what we can see is that we come out of solar minimum very slowly. It's a very, very slow lift up out of solar minimum. Took a long time for this solar cycle to get going. It wasn't really until sort of 2010, 2011 that it finally started to take off, and then we went up to the first peak, the first maximum of solar cycle 24 happening at the end of 2011. I think it was December 2011 with that sunspot just there. After that, through 2012 and into 2013, we sort of hovered around at a very weak level of solar activity, considering we was at solar maximum. So for a solar maximum 2012 into 2013, we saw really quite weak activity indeed. And then we got the second peak of solar cycle number 24. You see how that orange line then in the second half of 2013 and into the start of 2014 takes off and goes up to that level. And the solar maximum of solar cycle number 24 happened in February 2014 with that orange spot just there. After that, solar activity has been declining away from solar maximum down to solar minimum. Not a linear process, so you do get variation. You get some months, for example, this one just here back at the start of 2015 had really quite a low sunspot number, but then it went back up again later on in 2015 with that orange spot just there, and then a drop, and then back up, and then a drop. And so on, another drop there, back up, another drop, it lifts back up again, and then another drop. And you see how this process works as we go into solar minimum quite slowly. The trend is down, but we do get months that deviate from the trend. That was our last big spike up in activity. I think that was around September 2017. After that, we dropped down into solar minimum, really. So this is all kind of like solar minimum stuff, albeit we're not at the true solar minimum just yet. So that's where we are right now for March 2019. So you can see we're very, very low, at a very low level of solar activity. But look how low February was. Interestingly, February was kind of like our first month that was actually on the floor. With this chart, and then in March it bobs back up again. But I would expect that before much longer that's going to go back down again. So, I mean, April probably going to keep the orange spot around there somewhere. But I don't think it'll be long through the summer and into the autumn of 2019. But we'll see more of these orange spots appearing on the floor of the chart. Look how many of them we had back in 2008 to 2009 when it was at true solar minimum then. So I mean, we're around solar minimum definitely. We're probably not at true solar minimum just yet. The next chart we look at is comparing solar cycle 24 to solar cycle 23. So solar cycle 23 ran from 1996 through to 2008. It shows you how much weaker this solar cycle has been compared to the last solar cycle. So look how much quicker we was to come out of solar minimum and into solar maximum during solar cycle number 23. Very, very quick, rapid ascent up to solar maximum through 1997 and 1998, reaching solar maximum in the year 2000 with that green spot just there. And then of course we have the double peak. You usually get a double peak, but typically the first peak is the true solar maximum. The second peak is not normally quite as strong as the first peak. So this solar cycle does that a little bit differently. Solar cycle 24 does that a little bit differently. But you see the double peak there, 2000 and 2002, and then the decline down into solar minimum from 2002 into the mid 2000s. That's when we get towards solar minimum, of course, just there. So that's around 2007. And then true solar minimum of solar cycle 23 and the beginning of solar cycle 24 occurs in 2008. And as we know, very, very slow ascent then into the new solar cycle. It takes a long time to get going, a much flatter curve, if you like, upwards into the solar cycle compared to this one, which is much more vertical in terms of solar cycle 23's ascent. And then again you can see the double peak of solar cycle 24, the first one at the end of 2011, the second one, the true solar maximum of solar cycle 24 occurring in February 2014. Notice how the double peak, we do have a double peak for solar cycle 23, but the first peak is the true solar maximum, second peak is a little bit under. And then again you see, and you just see how much weaker this solar maximum was, or this solar cycle generally has been, compared to solar cycle number 23. Shows you very clearly. So that's where we are right now in terms of solar cycle number 24. We're just there compared to this sort of point in solar cycle 23. So that's where we are really. So we're kind of like late 2007, early 2008 for this solar cycle compared to solar cycle 23. The true solar minimum of solar cycle 23 and the beginning of solar cycle 24 occurred at the end of 2008. So we're kind of like where we was at the beginning, I suppose, of 2008 or at the end of 2007. This tells us we may have like 6 to 12 months of solar cycle 24 still to go. We'll go more towards 6 to 9 months. So I think we perhaps reach the true solar minimum of this solar cycle in the winter. It may well be that we'll reach true solar minimum and begin solar cycle 25 in the winter of 2019-2020. But it might be a little bit later. It might be sort of spring 2020. As I say, it's always very difficult to know when you're going to get to solar minimum, and you don't know when you've got to it until you have got to it and you've started the new solar cycle. And again, this is showing solar cycle 23 and solar cycle 24 progression in terms of flux. Again, it tells us that this solar cycle has been weaker compared to solar cycle 23 in terms of solar flux. So again, that's solar cycle 23. This is solar cycle 24. You see how much weaker solar flux has been, which you would expect because we've had a much reduced number of sunspots with this solar cycle compared to solar cycle number 23. Where we are right now, the solar flux is just there. So again, we're on this sort of area, or around this sort of area where we was in solar cycle number 23. Tells us that we've probably got just a little bit longer to go, a few more months to go before we reach true solar minimum, and this will probably tick down ever so slightly, just a little bit more from where we are right now. Not much. It doesn't deviate as much with solar flux compared to sunspots, but we will probably tick down a little bit more with solar flux, as we will with sunspots, until we get to solar cycle number 25. Now, all the way along with it, with this solar cycle, we've had the comparison between solar cycle 24, the current solar cycle, and solar cycle 12. That's a very weak solar cycle that occurred a very long time ago. Solar cycle number 12 ran from 1877 through to 1890. And as I say, all the way along, these two solar cycles have been very much on a par with one another. So this is the beginning of both of these solar cycles. Green, of course, the green lines are solar cycle 12, the orange line solar cycle 24. So you see that again we have a very, very low level solar activity to start. Notice both solar cycles very, very weak, coming out of their sort of solar minimums and going into their solar cycles. Both of them with a double peak, but the second peak, interestingly, is a little bit stronger than the first peak with both of these solar cycles, which is quite unusual. Notice how similar the periods between the two peaks are with these solar cycles. So the number 24, that's kind of like 2012 and the first half of 2013. Very similar looking. And then the way we've gone down into solar minimum, also very similar. So these two solar cycles have been tracking one another very, very closely all the way along, really. That's where we are right now for solar cycle, which is there, really. So that's where we are right now for solar cycle number 24. We are on a par with where we was in solar cycle, at this point in solar cycle 12. Noticing in solar cycle 12, there was that final spike just there, which for us will be kind of like 2 or 3 months on. So that would be kind of like around July. Watch out around July or August. See if we get one last really big, well, it's not really big ramp up, but see if we get one last ramp up in activity, in solar activity, before then we drop down into true solar minimum. So if that happens, if we do track with solar cycle 24 and we get one final spike, then that will happen from where we are right now. You expect that to happen somewhere around July, something like that, and then the collapse, the final collapse into solar minimum, taking place through the autumn and into the winter of 2019-2020. This is how solar cycle 24 looks compared to all solar cycles going right way back to number 1. The red line is solar cycle number 24. So look how much weaker this solar cycle has been compared to most of the solar cycles. I mean, we've got these ones up here. Those are the very strongest solar cycles. I'm not sure which solar cycles they are. They may be it's green and yellow, so that could be kind of like solar cycles 19 and 20, maybe. I'm sure James will fill me in on which solar cycles those very strongest ones are. But this is the current solar cycle. This is 24. This is 24. This red line just here, and it's very, very much. You see, it's very, very much on the weaker side of these solar cycles, with most of the solar maximums being around here. Much stronger, with most of the solar cycles going all the way back to solar cycle number 1. Where we are right now with the red line is just there. So around 120 months into the solar cycle. See, most of the solar cycles run for something like 130 months. Some of them very extended, can go on quite a bit longer than that. We've got this one just here that went on for 169 months. Not sure what that one is. Maybe it's solar cycle number 9, that blue line. Just there, it could be solar cycle 4, actually. Anyway, you see that we've still got a little way to go for solar cycle 24. Obviously, if we stopped there and started solar cycle 25, we would be well short of most of the solar cycles. So it's still got another few months to go with this solar cycle, definitely. If it was to turn out to be very extended, we would have another year or two to go, but I don't think that's going to happen. Obviously, what we see here with these blue lines just there is quite rare. So we've got a little bit longer to go with solar cycle 24, but the main point is how much weaker this solar cycle has been. It continues to be. Look at this, we're just there. So compared to most of these lines at a similar point, we're still kind of like at the weakest level, really. In fact, we may be at the weakest level compared to all other solar cycles. I suppose we've got these ones just here, but we're almost at the weakest level compared to all other solar cycles at this point in those solar cycles. Quite remarkable, really, how weak this solar cycle has been, number 24, how weak it's been throughout, really, from beginning to end. If we compare it just to the weakest solar cycles, so the weakest solar cycles are number 5 and number 6. They're the 2 Dalton minimum solar cycles, of course. There's number 12, the one that we're tracking very close to at the moment. Well, we have been tracking very close to it throughout the solar cycle, really. Number 14 and number 16, and then a long run through to solar cycle number 24. So you've got the 2 Dalton minimum solar cycles there, which were weaker with their maximums compared to solar cycle 24. The red line, of course, is solar cycle 24. So we've got 12, 14, 16, 24 up here, and then we've got 5 and 6 for 2 Dalton minimum solar cycles down there. So in terms of solar maximum, this has been a stronger solar maximum or solar cycle, been a stronger solar cycle than the 2 Dalton minimums of 5 and 6. But where we are right now is just there, and you see that actually we are at the weaker level, really. So it's interesting that solar cycle 6 is the interesting solar cycle. That is a Dalton minimum solar cycle, but the descent into solar minimum was actually much slower compared to most of these weak solar cycles, including number 24. And at this point, the Dalton minimum solar cycle of number 6 was actually quite a lot more active than the current solar cycle. You can see that we are very much at the lowest level of solar activity throughout all of the solar cycles, going back to solar cycle number 1. You can see that quite clearly, and you can also see we've got a little bit longer to go with this solar cycle. So again, we see that we've got these coloured lines just here lasting a few more months. We're at around 120 months in, and we can see that we've probably got around another 10 or so to go, perhaps a little bit less than 10, but certainly got a little bit longer to go. So cycle number 24, unless it finishes very, very early. Right, so that's brought you up to date with all of the trackers. I'm going to pause the video there. I'm going to go and have a little drink of water. When we come back, we're going to talk about Solar Cycle 25, because now, as we're so close to solar minimum, it's time to start thinking about Solar Cycle 25. We've got the first forecast in for Solar Cycle 25, and that's where we're going to go to next. So I'm going to pause the video there, around 25 minutes in, and we'll meet back in around 2 seconds, and we'll have a bit of a chat about the next solar cycle number 25. So see you very shortly. Alright, we're back, and we're ready to resume Solar Sunday. So before the break, we was talking about all of the trackers. We brought you a date with all of the trackers for Solar Cycle number 24. James sent through all of the updated trackers, and you see where we are with the Solar Cycle, which is at very close to or at solar minimum, but just a little bit short of true solar minimum at the beginning of Solar Cycle 25. We've probably got around, another 6, 9, possibly 12 months left of Solar Cycle 25. I think 12 months will be pushing it, so let's say more like 6 to 9. And I think we're probably going to go into Solar Cycle 25 sometime around the winter of 2019, 2020, actually. So what we're going to talk about now is Solar Cycle 25, because it's been a very late in the day to get any forecast for Solar Cycle 25, but we have got a few in now, have been a few updated over the past few months. I'm going to bring you up to date with those, and that's what we're going to do for the second half of this video. So the first forecast we're going to talk about is the one from NOAA, one from the National Weather Service. I assume NASA is part of this as well. They have just released, in the past few days, 5th of April actually, 2019, just released their forecast for Solar Cycle number 25. I'm going to leave a link to this in the description at YouTube, and we link to NOAA on the links page at GasOvids anyway, of course. So the headline is: solar experts predict the sun's activity in Solar Cycle 25 to be below average, similar to Solar Cycle 24. I'll read you a little bit of the forecast. So this is what they're saying. April 5th, 2019. Scientists charged with predicting the sun's activity for the next 11-year solar cycle say it's likely to be weak, much like the current one. Remember, the current solar cycle 24 was the weakest since for at least a century, probably even longer than that. The current solar cycle 24 is declining and is predicted to reach solar minimum the period when the sun is least active, late in 2019 or in 2020. So that's sort of the time period we're looking at, I think, around the winter of 2019, 2020, possibly into spring 2020. And that will make it around 12 months still left for Solar Cycle 24, of course. Solar Cycle 25 prediction panel experts said Solar Cycle 25 may have a slow start, but is anticipated to peak with solar maximum occurring between 2023 and 2026, and a sunspot range of 95 to 130. This is well below the average number of sunspots, which typically ranges from 140 to 220 sunspots per solar cycle. The panel has high confidence that the coming solar cycle should break the trend of weakening solar activity seen over the past 4 cycles. So that's important. There has been a theory that solar cycle 25 would be even weaker than Solar Cycle number 24. If it was even weaker, then we would be starting to talk about going into Dalton levels of solar activity. But NOAA and NASA appear to be saying that no, we're actually going to, though it is going to be a weak solar cycle overall, it won't continue the trend of declining solar activity. There's a quote here also that says, we expect Solar Cycle 25 to be very similar to Cycle 24, another fairly weak cycle preceded by a long, deep minimum, said panel co-chair Lisa Upton, PhD, solar physicist with Space Systems Research Corp. The expectation that solar cycle 25 will be comparable in cycle 25 will be comparable in size to cycle 24 means that the steady decline in solar cycle amplitude seen from cycles 21 to 24 has come to an end, and that there is no indication that we are currently approaching a Maunder type minimum in solar activity. So it has been talked about Maunder minimums, and of course that would potentially take us towards little ice age type conditions, which coincided with the Maunder minimum. NASA are saying there is no expectation of that happening. The solar cycle prediction gives a rough idea of the frequency of space weather storms of all types, from radio blackouts to geomagnetic storms and solar radiation storms. It is used by many industries to gauge the potential impact of space weather in the coming years. Space weather can affect power grids, critical military, airline and shipping communications, satellites and global positioning systems, GPS signals, and can even threaten astronauts by exposure to harmful radiation doses. So cycle 24 reached its maximum, the period when the sun is most active, in April 2014, with a peak of 82 sunspots. I thought it was February 2014, but they're saying April. The sun's northern hemisphere led the sunspot cycle, peaking over 2 years ahead of the southern hemisphere sunspot peak. And then it goes on for a little bit more, tells you about the science of solar forecast, which we won't go into in this video. But you want to read the rest, then as I say, the link to this is in the description of YouTube, and we link to National Weather Service on the links page at Gaz Weather Vids. So the important point here, well, there's two really very important points. The first one is that it's going to be another weak solar cycle. I think they're perhaps underplaying the weakness of solar cycle number 24. As we saw on our trackers in the first half of the video, this has been a very, very weak solar cycle indeed. It is down there with the 5 weakest, going back to solar cycle number 1. Not quite as weak as the 2 Dalton minimum solar cycles number 5 and number 6, but certainly it's within the boundaries of the very weakest solar cycle. So I think they perhaps downplay how unusual this solar cycle has been, how weak it's been, really. And another one similar, solar cycle 25 coming out similar, 24, would be quite unusual to get 2 solar cycles together as weak as that. They're also saying that the decline in solar activity that we've seen over the past few solar cycles, starting with, I think it's number 21, through to 22, through to 23, and then finally we reach the solar cycle round at number 24, has ended, which means they're kind of ruling out the chance of going to Dalton minimum levels, solar cycles 5, 6 type levels, and they are definitely ruling out going weaker than that to Maunder minimum type levels. I think Maunder minimum solar activity is before solar cycle number 1, so there is actually no official solar cycle for the Maunder minimum, I don't think, but we know from observations that it was an incredibly long period during Maunder minimum with no sunspots, and they're kind of like ruling that out at the National Weather Service. Now this is showing how solar cycle 25 will compare to the previous solar cycles. So we begin here actually with solar cycle. It's a fantastic graph. James and Richard sorted this one out for me, so big thank you to them. We begin with solar cycle number 22. Obviously this is going to be coming from NASA, from Hathaway, and we can see that in solar cycle 22, which is a solar cycle that runs from around 1985 and goes through to 1996, we can see with the maximum of solar cycle 22 occurring just there around 1990. That was a very active solar cycle, albeit it was a little bit weaker compared to solar cycle 21, solar cycle that preceded it. Then we go through to solar cycle 23 that we talked about quite a lot. That begins in 1996 and ends in 2008. There's the maximum of solar cycle 23 occurring in 2000 and 2002. You see that the maximum for solar cycle 23 is weaker than the maximum for solar cycle 22, and as I say, solar cycle 22 maximum was weaker than solar cycle 21's maximum. And then that takes us to solar cycle 24, of course, this one just here. And again, you can see how much weaker solar cycle 24 has been compared to both solar cycle 23 and solar cycle 22. Well, this is the forecast for solar cycle number 25 from Hathaway. And you can see it is on a par. Solar cycle 25 is being forecast to be on a par with solar cycle 24. So if this is right, the two solar cycles are coming out very, very similar to one another. And of course, that arrests the decline that's been taking place in the solar cycles since going from solar cycle 21 through to solar cycle 22. If that's right, remember, it's just a forecast, it's not a guarantee, although in the quotes in the report at NOAA do sound very, very sure of themselves. But I mean, this is really pushing the boundaries, being able to forecast solar cycles. This is really, really pushing the boundaries. I'm not sure what the reliability of this is. So it's only a forecast. This is what they're saying. Solar cycle 25 peaking sometime around the middle of the 2020s, coming out with a very, very similar solar maximum to solar cycle number 24. Notice both have prolonged solar minimums, by the way. Both have a long upwards curve into the solar cycles. Compared to like what happened when solar cycle 22 changed to solar cycle 23, where the curve is much more vertical, much quicker to rise up. So again, this does suggest that we're going to have quite a prolonged and protracted solar minimum, and it will probably take solar cycle 25 a long time to get itself going. Remember, the coldest winters, I know we've got people watching this because they're wondering about chance of cold winters. The coldest winters that we have with this solar cycle number 24 happened during that slow upwards trend through 2009, 2010. That's when the coldest winters of this solar cycle occurred, as we had that very, very slow rise up. So that would perhaps imply early 2020s have the greatest chance of being colder winters again, maybe. For the UK and Northern Europe, very speculative that. But again, it is just a forecast, so it could be wrong. There will be a margin of error with this. There'll be sort of the low end. It could be down here somewhere, which would mean that it's weaker than solar cycle 24. And I assume there's an upper end as well, which would be up here. That will make it a stronger solar cycle than number 24. So it's only a forecast. There will be a margin of error. In March 2007, there was actually a prediction made by NOAA for solar cycle number 24, and you can see the higher end of the prediction was up here. So the high end of the prediction back in March 2007 was kind of like at, or maybe a little bit stronger than the maximum of solar cycle 23. Interestingly, the low end, the very lowest end, was down here. The lowest part of the range, if you like, was down there with that orange line. And that's around where we came out, actually, with the maximum for solar cycle number 24. So in March 2007, what this tells us is that in March 2007, they was probably forecasting solar cycle 24 to be a little bit stronger than it actually turned out. And the very lowest end of their range of prediction was actually where we came out for solar cycle number 24. Now, if there is, as I say, if there is a range with this prediction for solar cycle 24, the low end could be down there somewhere, the high end could be up there somewhere, perhaps. If this is like what happened with solar cycle 24's prediction, so if this solar cycle 25 was to come out at the low end of their range, then it will actually continue the trend of weakening solar cycles. They're pretty much ruled it out in the piece that I read out as I started this second section of the video. But to me, it sounds a little bit overconfident, I have to say, what they're saying at NOAA. I think they are very much trying to spin the fact that we're not going to go into Dalton or Maunder minimum type solar activity levels. But there's got to be a range of error with this prediction. Any forecast, particularly when you're talking about something as unspecific as solar activity forecasting, sunspot forecasting, there's any sort of forecast like this going to have a range of error, an upper range and a lower range, and that would be kind of like mid-range, I would have thought. Anyway, I may be wrong about that, but to me it just sounds a little bit too specific and a little bit overconfident, even, this forecast that they have given out over the past couple of weeks. Now, in April 2009, so at the start of solar cycle 24, then they did have the forecast right. So you see, this is in April 2009. You see down there with sunspot activity at that point, the red line is kind of like the predicted forecast, if you like. And by that point, they had got it right, but that was into the start of solar cycle number 24. That was into the start of this current solar cycle, whereas where we are right now is probably more similar to when they issued that forecast, the solar cycle 24, back in 2007. So I'll just have a little bit of a health warning about that. Now, there are other forecasters out there that are also revealing their forecast. So one forecaster is Leif Svalgaard. Hope I pronounced that correctly. And back last year, he revealed his solar cycle 25 prediction. We're at toolblokewordpress.com. And again, I'll leave a link to this website in the description at YouTube. So this is from 9th of June 2018. Solar scientist and part-time NSA operative Leif Svalgaard has produced a prediction for solar cycle 25, 4 years after Rick Salvador produced his 86-year prediction in the swiftly censored pattern recognition in physics. It appears at the end of a 30-page PDF document he has published on his website. That's Leif Svalgaard, I think. This is an interesting document with a wealth of gaily coloured butterfly diagrams, polar field reconstructions, and more. Leif self-deprecatingly follows his prediction title with, in brackets, at last, not only because it comes to at the end of 30 pages of preamble, but because he's acutely aware of his method's limitations. So, just scrolling down, of course, to say that solar cycle 25 will be somewhere between solar cycle 24 and solar cycle 20, provided the polar field precursor relationship holds. The reason this prediction has arrived so late in solar cycle 24 is that the method it relies on can't be applied until shortly before the minimum of the preceding cycle, and it only gives the ability to estimate the peak amplitude of the approaching cycle. It has nothing to say about cycle length or what comes after. It predicts that solar cycle 25 will be higher than solar cycle 24, so this is actually more of the upper range compared to prediction from NOAA, but lower than solar cycle 20. This is in sharp contrast with our orbital resonance theory developed here at Talk Shop and distilled into a predictive model by Rick Salvador in his 2013 PRP paper, a mathematical model of the sunspot cycle over the past 1,000 years. He gives a 100-year prediction, which he currently rescaled to match the new Klecht et al. Numbering system. We discussed its progress recently. So this is that prediction, not from Leif Svalgaard. I'll get rid of that. This is coming from, this is the prediction that they speak about just there, which is which is a prediction from out from there. That's toolblokewordpress.com. It's from there. Orbital resonance theory. So this forecast is showing that solar cycle 25 will be weaker than solar cycle 24. That's solar cycle 24 just there, of course. This is the maximum of solar cycle 25. And they go even weaker then to solar cycle 26. That's kind of like, solar cycle 26 is kind of like, on that forecast, going down to sort of Maunder minimum type levels, and then they're predicting that solar activity gradually increases then through the second half of through the solar cycle of the second half of this century, but never getting back to the levels that we were at in the 20th century. Remember though, Lee Svalgaard, his forecast is taking solar cycle 24 somewhere between solar cycle, his prediction for solar cycle 25, I should say, is taking it somewhere between solar cycle 24 and solar cycle number 20. So that's a big error range, of course. This is solar cycle 24 just here. That's solar cycle 22. That would be solar cycle 22 just there. So I mean, solar cycle 20 would probably be up there somewhere. Leaf is forecasting a big range of potential error between solar cycle 20 at the high end and solar cycle 24 at the low end. But Lee Svalgaard is actually stronger with his forecast for solar cycle 25 compared to NOAA and NASA. And then finally, we found this on Twitter. This is from Dr. Wahid Udin. And this was tweeted a little while ago. This is based on the Arima model. I think that's right. Arima. And this is, I'm not sure of the reliability of this model. I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about Dr. Wahid Udin either. Just throwing this one out there because, again, it's showing you the decline in the solar cycles from 22 to 23 to 24. And the purple line, of course, is this model, the Riemann model. So I assume this is all sort of hindcasting type stuff from this model. So you see it does hindcast quite well compared to the reality of those solar cycles. But look what the forecast is. This was generated, I think, in the summer of 2018. That's showing August 2018 just there. So this was generated in the summer of 2018. And look how weak this prediction is for solar cycle number 25, going right way up to 2030. That's December 2030 just there. There is hardly a noticeable solar maximum. So you see how the solar maximums normally look in the solar cycle. So even 24, which is a weak solar maximum, you see quite clearly there is a solar maximum being forecast. But this model, the Riemann model, is not really forecasting any particular solar maximum. We just sort of keep around that very, very weak level of solar activity throughout solar cycle 25. Obviously, that would be very, very dramatic. It would be kind of like, I assume it would be kind of like what this is forecasting for solar cycle 26. Just there. That's been forecast for solar cycle 25 with barely any sort of noticeable solar maximum whatsoever. And of course, there's this famous chart that turned up some time ago, back towards the early part of this solar cycle. And again, that's what the forecast was. I'm not sure who did this. I can't remember who did this. I found it, I think, at What's Up With That years and years ago. I'm sure somebody will know who actually created this forecast. But the forecast for solar cycle 25 looked like that on this chart. So they're the two Dalton minimum solar cycles number 5 and number 6, way weaker than that, and go down to Maunder minimum type levels with that forecast. And I would think that would be the kind of thing that we would see if this forecast that Dr. Wahid viewed in based on the Ariman model, if that came off with this just sort of flatlining solar cycle that never takes off at all, never goes into a solar maximum particularly, I think that would look very similar to that. So again, I don't know the reliability of that whatsoever, just throwing it out there. We found it on Twitter. It appears to be based on a model forecast, and I just want to throw it out there because there are a lot of different forecasts. So we have got forecasts in the solar cycle number 25, and it appears that no, actually somewhere in the middle of the range. We've got Lee Svelgar, but he's actually going for a stronger solar cycle for number 24. Compared to it was actually going for a stronger solar cycle. Been a very long video, nearly 50 minutes, so I'm getting a little bit tongue-tied. So starting that again, we've actually got Lee Svelgar, who is going for a rather stronger solar cycle with 25 compared to solar cycle 24. And then we've got those charts that I showed you at the end there, that are going for a very, very weak solar cycle still. Then we've got NOAA coming out somewhere in the middle. They're forecasting solar cycle 25 to finish up very, very close to 24. Albeit, we do have to again put on record that at this point, or around this point, in solar cycle number 23, when NOAA was making their prediction for solar cycle 24, there's actually at the upper end, if you like, and it did finish up a rather weaker solar cycle than they was predicting. So all of this is very, very cutting edge stuff. It really is pushing the envelope with these forecasts, and we'll just have to wait and see. But it does look as though it's going to be quite a weak solar cycle again. It appears it's going to take us a long time to get this solar cycle going if the forecast from NOAA is correct, which means we have an extended solar minimum as we had when we went from 23 to 24. We'll do that again, it looks like, with 24 to 25 if the forecast is correct. And so for those of you that are interested in cold winter potential around solar minimum, maybe if it follows the same sort of pattern that we had with 23 to 24, the coldest winters occurred as we had that really slow rise in activity going into solar cycle 24. If that happens again, then it's early 2020s that could hold the key for some colder winters in the UK and Northern Europe, potentially. Right, that's it for Solar Sunday. I hope you found it interesting. I hope we've made up for the long old gap that we've had in Solar Sunday over the past, well, it's getting on for a year since we did Solar Sunday back in July 2018. So it's been a long time coming. Hope we've made up for it. And we're going to try and get another Solar Sunday in for you before the winter updates commence in September. So then maybe a Solar Sunday in July, maybe August. We're not totally sure yet, but just watch this space. One more Solar Sunday this year is very, very probable, I would have thought. But it does depend on all of the other updates, of course. Alright, this video will be placed on the Solar Cycle 24-25 updates page with a written summary going over everything that we discussed in the video. And that's going to be coming up for you later on today, probably this evening. I am pushed for time, so it could be that written summary won't be appearing until tomorrow. I really will try and get that done for you today, though. Come back later on for all of today's other updates. Don't forget, we're giving away the competition, or we're giving away the prize in the competition. But at 52 minutes, that is all for now, and thanks for watching.